There are lots of ways to define success. You can define it by money. You can define it by career. You can define it by accomplishments. You can give all of that up, and you can define it by a risky opportunity not to make much money, but to do great good. I don't have a preference which one. I think they're both honorable. They both make the world go round. But when you give up one to go after the other, and the other is the risky one, that takes a lot of purpose. It causes a lot of pressure, and we're going to talk about it. Tristan Griffin is next. The heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people just like you and me, business folk that get up in the morning, put our feet on the floor, and go after something, try to get something done, and the why that goes into that, and why we do what we do, and why we do it the way we do it when the pressures tend to want to knock us down. That's what this show is all about. Don't forget to like us, follow us, subscribe, tell a friend, anything you can do to help further this cause. We do this on purpose so that other folks who are feeling the pressure might not feel so alone. And that's what this show is all about. And if you think someone else should hear it or see it, please let them know about it. We thank you for that in advance. Purpose Under Pressure is and has been ever since we began 5 seasons ago and now into our 6th season, brought to you by the Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations, also in Jacksonville, Florida. I became familiar with Sandler by the Ruby Group, Mike Jones, Ken Guest, the team, many years ago, and they have always instilled purpose in everything that they do. When they talk with salespeople, when they talk with businesses, they want to know why you're doing what you're doing. They want to know how you plan to do what you do and what the result needs to be on the other side. And then they'll build a plan to make that happen. It's not about how many calls can I make. It's not about how many sales can I. It's about doing things right. And if your business is that kind of business and needs that kind of a jolt, perhaps when it comes to how you drive revenue, then Sandler by the Ruby Group is going to be who you should reach out to. And you can do so checking them out online at rubygroup.sandler.com. You'll be glad you did. My guest today is Tristan Griffin, founder and executive director of Farming with Friends. That's a local community farm that fosters really a sense of purpose and independence for disabled people. People like Tristan that you're going to meet that do these things for people who need them so desperately is something that I don't have in me. And I'm so, honored to be able to talk with folks that have this heart, because I wasn't built this way. And it's so interesting to me to understand and learn how these folks get this important work done. His wife and he, Melanie, and he live in Granger Township, just south of Hinckley, where the farm is located in Medina County. I'm excited for you to meet Tristan Griffin. Welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bryan.
I'm glad you're here. I'm serious about that. I think God makes us differently. And my heart has always been for-profit capitalistic business. That's all. And I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm not ashamed by it. That's just what I've always known and what I've always loved. And I've always been I never quite understand the drive of people like you that have a deeper conviction for perhaps maybe what is even more right. And maybe I'm not stating that right, but I really honor that. And I thank you for doing everything you do. We're going to talk about that. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what Farming with Friends is. Tristan, let's talk about your purpose. Let's talk about how this all came about, and let's go from there.
That sounds good. Yeah. So Farming with Friends, as you said, is a farm that really hangs its hat on 3 things. One would be a style of farming called regenerative farming. The second would be employment of people with disabilities. And the third would be community engagement. And we operate on an 87-acre farm in Hinckley. We have a large orchard, a berry patch. We've got laying hens. We have meat chickens. We've got sheep. And we also have some garden operations. So about 6 different operations that we currently run, and currently 5 employees. So we just started a year ago. So we're hoping to eventually grow into an organization that employs 10 to 15 people with disabilities on a yearly basis. And for every 3 to 4 people with disabilities, 1 typically abled person to work alongside of our employees with disabilities.
And how did this come to be? Is this something that you always saw yourself doing? Is this the answer to your life's goal, or is there a different path here?
Yeah, not even close. I
That's
call
the way
it
it goes.
a career journey. But So yeah, I'm not originally from Ohio. I'm from Texas, and found myself in law school at the University of Texas in 2011 through 2014, and in my mind was headed down the path of law. A few things happened in my life that really made me rethink some of those things, and decided to transition into coaching college football in 2014, which brought me to Ohio. I did that for a couple of years, met an Ohio girl while I was there at Tiffin University, and we moved to Akron in 2016. And really, that's when my career sort of shifted, although you could have said it shifted from law to coaching, from more of a focus on trying to help and serve people outside of the traditional business context, right? And so we moved to Akron in 2016 to work for a large nonprofit called Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Did that for 7.5 years. Started having children. Found out that our oldest daughter had a disability in 2019. And so, even with the context of what we were doing for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, we added disability into that. And so, we started doing sports camps for people with disabilities in 2019, 2020, and then eventually came to the point of this farm that employs people with disabilities that we launched in 23. And really, you ask, how do we get here? It's such a difficult question to answer, but so much of it has to do with our daughter, Scout, who has a disability. She was diagnosed with something called Smith-Magenis syndrome in 2019, and really that was the catalyst for us meaning my wife and myself, to make the decision to utilize as much of our daily lives in the professional world to serve Scout and people like Scout. And we really just didn't know what that meant. And so we really just tried to take it a day at a time and see what opportunities unfolded. It just so happened that the organization that I was working for at the time, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which had been around for 65 years and done all sorts of sports activities, they had never done anything in the disability sports realm to that point. Okay. And so they wanted to get into that in 2020, which is right after we found out the diagnosis. So we said, hey, we're going to pioneer this. We launched FCA's first sports camp for people with disabilities in 2020 in the Akron area, and it exploded beyond our wildest imaginations. Within 45 days of opening registration, we had over 100 campers registered, and we knew we were on to something. And so did FCA on a global scale. There were, at the time, over 3,000 staff in over 100 countries. And so they said, hey, let's launch this on a global scale. And so we spent our last 2 years with FCA not only managing the sports camp we launched in Akron, but also helping others across the country and the globe sometimes replicate what we were doing in Akron. And so all of that sort of continued to snowball into this idea of a farm, which related to my daughter and her disability. We had an illegal backyard flock of chickens in Akron at the time. And my daughter really just lit up in interacting with the chickens. We also had a poor excuse for a garden. And so I noticed that she kind of lit up in that environment as well. The little girl could dig in the dirt for a long time and really just, find a different sense of purpose and joy out there. And so that was happening a few years ago. I was also dealing with some personal health issues. I guess you could call it chronic pain, a lot of it migraine and inflammation related, that I found out stemmed a lot from both stress and my diet. Stress. But yeah, the diet piece really made me start to dig into our commercial industrial food chain and all that goes into our food. And so I became fairly passionate about that. And so all of this collided with a friend that bought a farm and a career path that was sort of didn't work out quite like we thought with FCA. And so it was late 22, early 23 that we decided, hey, let's launch this nonprofit to operate on this farm in Hinckley. And I kept working for FCA through the end of August of 23 and started with Farming with Friends September 1st.
So there's so much here. And I'm interested in maybe summing it down. It's purpose under pressure. And my idea is that your purpose needs to withstand the pressure. Mm-hmm. However, in your situation, it sounds like the pressure drove your purpose. It almost opened doors. You were at law school, and then you were a football coach, and then you're at FCA, and now you're doing this. Without each one of those steps, you're not here at this spot. How do you know what to say no to when the pressure is coming? How do you know when to stick with what you thought your gut was and keep going, or to open that door, walk through that door and open that next chapter?
Yeah, the pressure and the purpose are so related, certainly for me, I think for everybody. But when I'm feeling tremendous amounts of pressure, it is often because there's a misalignment between my values or my life and what is being acted out and what on a deeper level I should I really feel as if I should be doing, if that makes sense, and so that's where it started in law school, was this deep inner sort of conflict and turmoil of I'm a smart guy, the world says I should go do this, but I've got this something eating away inside of me, telling me to do something different. And that transition in 2014 to finally listening to the voice that said, "Hey, do the something different," was what really, in ways, relieved that pressure. It led to further pressures, pressures later on that arose. For me, so much of it comes down to intuition, right? And that still small voice inside of each one of us telling us where to go and what to do. And if I'm not in alignment with that, there's some level of discord within my life, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to categorize that. And for me, being able to slow down, recognize those moments, and start to realign those things has been the catalyst moving forward into the next opportunity.
And to take that one step further, Scoutsborn, you identify some issues there that you want to be able to address and help on a grander scale, and that becomes your purpose. And yet, it's very difficult doing what you're doing. You're starting something from scratch. You're building something new. You're dealing with employees. You're trying to grow. There's got to be so many pressures crashing down on you. How do you know to stay this course? What's holding your purpose in place?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it is just, again, going back to those moments where I have slowed down enough to say, I really feel as if this is the path forward, and it's just what, almost in ways, this will probably make sense. The challenges aren't challenges for the sake of challenge. They are clues, as you might say. And so the pressure that you're feeling, the things that are happening in your life, your daughter being born with a disability, which is an incredibly difficult thing to digest, if you can take the perspective that this is not a catastrophe, it is a clue regarding your path forward, and build the next step in your life based upon that clue, I think that's when you start to find yourself in this space of incredible things happening that you never would have dreamed of, based on, I guess you might call it a shift in perspective. But so for me, when the pressure comes, I just have to go back down to the point of, is this where I believe I should be, right? Is this where, whatever it makes sense for you? For me, is it where God would have me, right? Is this where I believe God would have me? And if so, the way I say it, it's the old quote. I can't remember who said it, but "Here I stand, I can do no other," right? Here I am. This is where I believe God wants me, regardless of pressure and challenge. Yeah, this is where I'm going to be. And take what comes as it may.
Everyone in the organization needs to know how to sell. Sales is the strength of any company. Whether or not you're in marketing, operations, or even finance, everyone has a strong shared accountability towards driving top-line revenue. Whether or not you're client-facing or talking over the phone, you're able to build a stronger level of rapport with the clients. Everyone in the organization shares that responsibility to know how to sell.
Tremendous. And so this brings us to an amazing opportunity. What's working well? I'm interested now. You're overcoming some pressures and it's hard.
Yeah.
And yet, you know you're where you need to be. So what are you most proud of? What's happening now on that farm that's making things better for the world?
Yeah, so I shared with you, I've been in the nonprofit world for 8.5 years. I have encountered the true struggle of mobilizing a group of people to accomplish a mission. It's an incredibly challenging field. And as relates to farming with friends over the last year, I have never, in 8.5 years, seen anything launch quite like it has from a community mobilization standpoint. We set out to raise $500,000 starting September 1 of 23. We've raised over $950,000 to this point. In a little over a year. We have hired 5 staff in that amount of time, and have hosted probably 250 volunteers onto the farm. We run 3 to 5 farm tours a week. It is just I have never quite seen something embraced so quickly by the community and launching so well. And so so much of the organizational forward-facing, community-facing of this endeavor has gone so well.
And what about Scout? How's that? Is she part of this? I'm interested in how the purpose goes together with what's actually happening on the farm.
Yeah, and so all of our children are in ways a part of this. I tell folks that farming with friends seems like an outward-focused, selfless endeavor, but at its core, and when we made this decision, so much of it was selfish in terms of how is this going to help us structure our lives in a way that we will be able to love our family well. And so my children now get the opportunity to be on an 87-acre farm. They get the opportunity to take their shoes off, run around in the creek, throw rocks, mess around with the sheep and the chickens and all of those things. And so the children are out at the farm probably once every other week at this point. We do a homeschooling model, and so we hope to utilize the farm in that as well. And so Scout gets out there, and they're only, all of our children are 6 years old and under, so they're not as helpful as they eventually will be.
That's a good way to put it, Dad.
Yeah. But they get out there and they do all the things. They'll help pull some weeds. They'll grab a shovel and put some wood chips out on the trees or whatever it might be. And so. Part of this for us too is just trying to build a beautiful life for our family as well, and so again, I think we're on that path. We're doing it well. Sometimes there are other times where we think, boy, we're not doing this well at all, and so it's just Scout's doing well, and she's enjoying the farm piece of it too.
And what happens then? And it gets back to the pressure a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you think things aren't going well? I know you have big plans. I know they have big ideas for the future. When you start to see those roadblocks, what do you and your wife talk about? What do you go through? How do you get through these next steps? And what are these issues that are happening now that are causing the pressure?
Yeah, well, I'll back it up for you too, and just tell you that, and I think a lot of us struggle with this. I have this somewhere deep inside me voice that says, if I don't keep striving, if I don't keep pushing, it's all going to fall apart, right? The whole organization is going to fall apart and it'll be done. And so that little voice ramps me up, right? And just keeps me striving, going like the Energizer Bunny, until I am stressed out. I'm not sleeping well, all of these things. It just turns into this disaster situation. And so,
I know that voice, by the way. I know that voice well.
Oh yeah. And it's powerful. And so, I recognized that voice many years ago and have slowly over time been trying to work my way out of listening to that voice. But you're catching me actually at a time where I'm probably 2 weeks out of just a full on unhealthy sprint. And an attempt to try and place this whole organization on my shoulders and do everything that I possibly can to make it go well. And really, you're again, you asked the question, what's not going as well, and so what's gone well has been the organizational, community facing side of things. The backend challenges for us have been relationally in interacting with our farm owner, So we don't own the farm. We created the nonprofit to operate on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And, we got into this with him over a year ago. And when we started, you both have this vision for the land and you're trying to put it together. And when we started, we projected that the visions would fit together better than they are at this point, a year later. And so we're having to have challenging conversations about, okay, what is the farm owner's vision at this point? What is our vision? And does it make a sense for us to operate on this land long term?
Mm-hmm.
And so that presents all sorts of challenges, right? That then goes into our operations of, okay, we have to press pause on this for now because we don't know if we're going to be on this land long term. We have to press go on searching for other land. And so there's all sorts of, new dynamics that are created in the midst of the challenge. But to wrap up and answer a little bit of your question regarding, when the roadblocks pop up, what do we do? Where do we go? Again, I think early on in my career, I tended to see the roadblocks as bad and the path without roadblocks is good, so to speak. And now the roadblocks for me are perhaps the greatest clues regarding the path forward, right?
Yes,
it would be really easy for me to say, darn it, this farm owner's vision is not lining up with ours. I'm just going to keep trying to beat my head against this and change everything and make it different and, so on and so forth, force what I want upon this situation. Or I can say, okay, here's the situation we find ourselves in. The farm owner's vision and our vision is not aligning. To me, that's a pretty good clue or indicator that, hey, we need to just have a conversation and figure out what is the path forward. Is it a different piece of land? Is it to stay on his land? So on and so forth. So again, just a perspective shift and seeing the roadblocks as great indicators of the path forward as opposed to this nuisance that should be either buried or avoided or, crushed into oblivion, whatever it might be.
Final question, 20 years from now, you're looking back on things. You have big dreams now, but you're in the beginnings of things. And we know how hard it is in any business, nonprofit, something you're starting fresh, any business. It's hard to keep it going, like you said, and it's hard to make those dreams come true. Looking back on things, what will you want to have seen happen in your life? What will people be saying about you? What does success ultimately look like for you, Tristan, and your family?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me would be for people, or at least myself even, to know that I relaxed more. I mean, that sounds so simple and goofy, but if I could tell myself 10 years ago one thing, it would be relax. And I'm sure 20 years from now, me would be looking back and telling myself, relax, right? I really think at this point in my personal journey, I'm trying my hardest to, this is going to sound goofy, but not care, or to let go, and
I think
let,
that's the right word.
Yeah, let life be, let the business be what it is, obviously not sit on my rear and do nothing.
No.
But to operate in a way that I'm at rest in the midst of all that comes our way, and I know that is the recipe for success for not only the business but my life, and my marriage and my family and all of those things. And so much of it comes back to that voice that tells me if I don't ramp up, it's all going to fall apart. And so, yeah, maybe it is he didn't listen to that voice, right? If people say one thing about me, he at least got to the point in his life where he heard that voice, but he chose to ignore it in favor of peace.
Little voice inside my head asked me to ask you one more question. I don't know how that'll work out. We'll see. What about that? What about that future you, that idea of relaxing, that idea of doing things on purpose like you're doing the right way? Mm-hmm. Have you learned from those that you're serving? Those folks with disabilities live in a different world than we live in. I hadn't thought of it this way, but what have you learned from them and from working with them and serving them?
I'm glad you did ask it, because this is the most magical piece of interacting in the disability space that I've seen. So often, typically able people jump into that space with a service mindset, and that's a good thing. There's no need to poo-poo on that, but it's ultimately this sort of pity mentality of, I'm going to go in and serve these people with disabilities. And really what I've found in 4 years now of, disability ministry is it's the exact opposite, right? It's the two-way street, but it is the lessons flowing the other way that are far more powerful. And what I mean by that is interacting in a space with people with disabilities so often strips the culture, the environment of pride and ego, of striving, right? Because you're interacting with people that don't necessarily have the ability or capacity to strive in the same way that us typically abled people do strive. And so, it's just interacting with my daughter, right? There's a rawness, an authenticity, a realness, a peace, and a love that just sort of transcends these goofy, trivial things that I often get wrapped up in. And so that is, it sounds crazy, but our vision at the farm is to create a place so dripping with the love of God that people cannot help but encounter Him while there. And I know that's this crazy, lofty, ethereal, hard to grasp idea, but the idea being that as we create these collisions between typically able people and people with disabilities, we're actually giving an opportunity to both sides, but oftentimes to the typically abled side, to set aside the goofy, trivial things that us typically abled folks get so caught up in and wound up in and stressed out about, and to lay those down while they're on the farm and perhaps carry that off the farm with them later on.
Tremendous. Tristan, how do people find out more about you, about Farming with Friends? How can they reach out to you? I imagine donations are accepted, or business sponsorships, or whatever it was. Help us to see how we can help you make the impact you're making.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find any of our contact information on our website, which is www.farmingwithfriends.org.
Tremendous. That I tell you, these shows, these shows that I do, and I've done many of them, I learn more by doing them than perhaps my audience does. Maybe that's why I'm just going to do them forever. I just, it's so amazing. We started this by saying, look, you and me aren't alike. I don't get it. I don't understand nonprofit and doing all the things that you're doing. And yet we're both driven by doing something well, doing something that makes a difference, doing something that makes an impact. We're bothered by voices in our heads that say we're not doing enough. We're never going to quit. And so are we that much different? And for me to even think that I could be on a level with you doing some of the things that you're doing makes me feel good about the steps that I'm taking too. So I thank you very much for sharing your story, being vulnerable about the issues you're going through, and maybe even helping others that are trying to decide what their next step is, just to relax a little bit and let that be. And so I appreciate your being part of the show.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for providing the platform and being such a great question asker.
Folks, that's one of the good guys. That's Tristan Griffin. He is the executive director and founder of Farming with Friends. It's a farm for where they're helping disabled people maximize their lives, maximize their worth, be a part of something bigger than themselves. And isn't that what we all need in this life? And so congratulations to Tristan, and thank you for being a part of this show. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group. Sellers are under pressure to perform. Don't we know it? Sandler will help you succeed on purpose. You'll find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at bryanmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week. We will see you next time on Purpose.